What if everything you believed about death was only the beginning? What if the end of life was not a final breath in darkness, but a doorway, a threshold into eternity where your heart would be weighed, your soul judged, and your name remembered for thousands of years? Tonight, we journey into the world of ancient Egypt, a civilization obsessed with death, yet more passionately devoted to eternal life than any culture in human history. A world where gods walked among mortals, where tombs were built like fortresses against oblivion, and where the fate of your soul depended not on wealth, but on truth. This is the story of gods, mummies, and the eternal quest to defeat death itself. This is the story of the ancient Egyptian afterlife. Long before the rise of Rome, long before the birth of Greece, the people of Egypt looked at the vast desert surrounding the Nile and saw not emptiness, but eternity. The desert preserved everything it touched. Bodies buried in its sands did not rot quickly, they endured. And from this silent observation grew one of the most powerful ideas in human history: that death was not an end, but a transformation. To the ancient Egyptians, life on Earth was only a temporary chapter in a much larger cosmic journey. They believed every human being was made up of multiple spiritual elements, each with its own destiny after death. The physical body was only one piece of the puzzle. Inside every person lived the Ka, the life force, the Ba, the personality that could travel between worlds, and eventually, Biak, the perfected spirit that would live among the gods. But this transformation did not happen automatically. It had to be earned, and it had to be protected, because the greatest enemy of eternal life was not death itself. It was destruction. If the body decayed, decay would starve. If the name was forgotten, the soul would vanish. If the heart was found impure, the spirit would be devoured forever. And so, ancient Egypt built an entire civilization dedicated to one singular purpose: defeating death. To understand their obsession, we must begin with their most sacred myth, the story of Osiris. Osiris was once a king of Egypt, wise and just, beloved by his people. He taught them agriculture, law, and order. Under his rule, Egypt prospered. But Osiris had a brother, Seth, a god of chaos, storms, and violence. Seth envied Osiris's power and plotted his destruction. One night, Seth tricked Osiris into lying inside a beautifully decorated chest. The moment Osiris entered, Seth slammed it shut, sealed it with molten lead, and threw it into the Nile. The chest drifted away, carrying the lifeless body of the king into darkness. Egypt mourned. Order had been murdered. Chaos had triumphed. But Osiris's wife, Isis, refused to accept this ending. She searched the world for her husband's body, enduring storms, deserts, and grief. When she finally found him, Seth struck again, tearing Osiris's body into pieces and scattering them across Egypt. It should have been the end. Instead, it became the beginning of the most powerful belief in Egyptian religion, that even death could be reversed. Isis gathered the fragments of Osiris's body, reassembled them, and performed sacred rituals to restore him. Through magic and devotion, she gave him new life, not as a king of the living, but as ruler of the dead. Osiris became the lord of the afterlife, the judge of souls, and the eternal symbol that death was not final. This myth shaped everything the Egyptians believed. If Osiris could be restored, then so could every human being, but only if their body was preserved. And so began one of the most extraordinary practices in human history: mummification. The process was long, precise, and sacred. It took 70 days to complete, and every step was guided by religious ritual. The embalmers would carefully remove the organs, dry the body with natron salt, and wrap it in layers of linen, each layer blessed with protective spells. Amulets were placed between the bandages to guard against evil. The face was often covered with a mask, preserving the identity of the deceased for eternity. But this was not done out of fear. It was done out of hope. Because to the Egyptians, the body was not a corpse. It was a vessel waiting to be awakened. The Ka would return to it. The Ba would recognize it. And the soul would be reborn in the next world. Yet preserving the body was only one part of the journey. The soul's path after death was filled with trials, dangers, and divine judgment. After death, the spirit would awaken in the Duat, the mysterious underworld ruled by Osiris. It was not a place of fire and punishment like later religious visions of hell. It was not a place of religious fire and punishment like later religious visions of hell. Instead, it was a shadowy reflection of Egypt itself. Rivers, fields, gates, and halls, all existing beyond the veil of life. But the Duat was also filled with monsters, demons, and obstacles meant to test the soul's worthiness. To survive this journey, the deceased needed knowledge, secret spells, and sacred instructions that would guide them safely through the underworld. These instructions were written in one of the most famous texts in history, what we now call the Book of the Dead. This was not a single book, but a collection of spells placed inside tombs, inscribed on papyrus, coffins, and walls. Each spell had a purpose: to open gates, to repel demons, to transform into animals, to speak the names of gods, and ultimately, to stand before the final judgment. Because at the end of the journey awaited the most terrifying and decisive moment in Egyptian belief, the weighing of the heart. In a great hall, the soul would stand before Osiris and a panel of 42 divine judges. At the center stood the scales of truth. On one side lay the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, order, and cosmic balance. On the other side lay the heart of the deceased, believed to be the seat of memory, emotion, and morality. The heart could not lie. If it was heavy with sin, guilt, or wrongdoing, the scales would tip. And waiting beside them was Anat, the devourer, a terrifying creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hind legs of a hippopotamus. If the heart failed the test, Ammit would consume it, erasing the soul forever. No rebirth, no afterlife, no memory, absolute oblivion. But if the heart balanced perfectly with the feather of truth, the soul would be declared pure. It would enter the field of reeds, a paradise that looked like an eternal, perfected version of Egypt. Lush fields, flowing water, gentle breezes, and endless peace. Here, the righteous would farm, celebrate, reunite with loved ones, and live forever in harmony with the gods. This vision of paradise reveals something extraordinary about Egyptian belief. They did not imagine eternity as abstract or distant. They imagined it as home, familiar, comforting, and deeply personal. And this belief changed how they lived their lives. To prepare for eternity, Egyptians built tombs not as places of mourning, but as eternal houses. The pyramids, the rock-cut tombs of the Valley of the Kings, and even simple burial chambers were designed to protect the body and provide everything the soul might need in the next world. Food, clothing, furniture, jewelry, weapons, and even board games were placed inside. Servant figurines called Shabti were buried alongside the dead, ready to work for them in the afterlife so they could rest in peace. Every wall painting, every carving, every prayer was meant to ensure one thing: that the deceased would be remembered and reborn. Because in ancient Egypt, the greatest death was not physical, it was being forgotten. To erase a name from history was to erase a soul from existence. This is why pharaohs covered temples and monuments with their names, why nobles commissioned elaborate tombs, and why families spoke the names of their ancestors aloud during rituals. As long as a name was spoken, the spirit lived on. In this way, the Egyptians created a civilization that was both deeply spiritual and intensely practical. Their religion did not ask people to escape the world. It asked them to perfect it, to live truthfully, honor the gods, respect order, and prepare for eternity. Because for them, death was not a mystery to be feared. It was a journey to be prepared for. Every tomb, every mummy, every prayer whispered into the desert winds was a declaration of faith in one profound idea. That life, if lived in balance and truth, could continue forever beyond the horizon of death, into a kingdom where time itself had no power. As the sun set each evening over the Nile and darkness spread across the sands, the people of ancient Egypt did not see an ending. They saw a promise that just as the sun rose again each morning, so too would the soul rise, renewed, eternal, and victorious over death itself. This promise of rebirth was woven into the rhythm of daily life, into the rising and setting of the sun, into the flooding of the Nile, and into every prayer whispered beneath painted temple ceilings. For the ancient Egyptians, the journey after death mirrored the journey of the sun god Ra, who sailed across the sky each day, bringing light to the world of the living. At sunset, Ra did not disappear. He descended into the Duat, traveling through the dangerous night hours, battling chaos and darkness, only to be reborn at dawn. Each sunrise was not just a natural event. It was proof that death could be defeated. This cosmic cycle shaped the Egyptian understanding of existence itself. Life, death, and rebirth were not separate stages. They were part of a sacred rhythm that governed the entire universe. To live in harmony with this rhythm meant to live in accordance with Ma'at, truth, balance, and order. Ma'at was not just a goddess. She was the invisible law that held creation together. When humans acted with honesty, justice, and respect, they aligned themselves with the very structure of the cosmos. But when they lied, stole, or caused harm, they tipped the balance toward chaos, the domain of darkness and destruction. This imbalance would not simply vanish after death. It would follow them into the hall of judgment, weighing down their hearts with the burden of their actions. This belief transformed morality into something deeply personal. Goodness was not about avoiding punishment. It was about preserving the delicate harmony between humanity and the divine order of the universe. Every honest word spoken, every act of kindness given, every ritual performed with sincerity became a step toward eternal life. And yet, despite this moral clarity, the path to the afterlife was never simple. Egyptian texts describe the Duat as a vast and mysterious realm divided into regions, gates, and caverns, guarded by terrifying beings. Each gate had its own name, its own guardian, and its own secret password. To pass safely, the soul needed to speak these names correctly, proving its knowledge and spiritual readiness. Knowledge itself became a form of protection, a shield against oblivion. This is why priests and scribes carefully prepared funerary texts for the deceased. Wealthy nobles commissioned beautifully illustrated papyrus scrolls filled with spells, hymns, and instructions. These were not mere decorations. They were survival guides for eternity. Without them, the soul risked becoming lost, wandering endlessly in darkness without direction or hope. But the Egyptians did not believe that only the elite deserved eternal life. Over time, these beliefs evolved. In the earliest periods, only pharaohs were thought to ascend to the heavens and join the gods. Their pyramids were not simply tombs, but cosmic launch points, designed to help the king's spirit rise to the stars and take his place among divine beings. Yet as centuries passed, the promise of the afterlife expanded. Ordinary people began to adopt similar burial practices, adapting royal rituals for their own families. Coffin inscriptions, amulets, and personal prayers allowed even farmers and craftsmen to imagine their own rebirth beyond death. This transformation reveals something remarkable about Egyptian spirituality. It became increasingly inclusive, offering hope not only to kings, but to all who lived truthfully. Still, the pharaoh remained central to this cosmic drama. He was not just a ruler. He was the living embodiment of divine order on earth. As the son of the sun god, his duty was to maintain harmony between the human world and the divine realm. His death, therefore, was not simply a national tragedy. It was a cosmic transition, requiring immense rituals to ensure that order itself did not collapse. This explains the immense effort poured into royal tombs hidden deep within the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. These tombs were labyrinths of corridors and chambers, each wall covered with vivid scenes of the afterlife journey. Gods guided the king through night skies and shadowy waters, presenting him to Osiris and welcoming him into eternity. Every image was both a decoration and a magical guarantee, ensuring that the king's spirit would recognize its path when the moment came. Yet even the most magnificent tomb would be meaningless without one final ritual: the opening of the mouth ceremony. Performed by priests at the burial, this sacred act symbolically restored the senses of the deceased. Using ritual tools, they touched the mouth, eyes, and ears of the mummy, allowing the spirit to breathe, see, hear, and speak once more in the afterlife. In their belief, death had silenced the body, but ritual could awaken it again. Imagine the emotional weight of this moment. Families gathered, priests chanting, incense filling the air, and before them lay the preserved body of a loved one, soon to embark on an eternal voyage. Grief and hope intertwined. Tears flowed, yet faith remained unshaken. They believed that this farewell was temporary, that one day, beyond the veil of death, they would meet again in the peaceful fields of eternity. And so, Egyptian tombs were never empty places. They were filled with life, scenes of banquets, music, farming, and celebrations painted on the walls. These were not mere memories. They were living realities meant to be experienced forever. The deceased would plow perfect fields that never failed, feast without hunger, and enjoy companionship without loss. In their paradise, suffering, illness, and aging simply did not exist. But not every soul reached this blessed destination easily. Some texts describe terrifying serpents that breathed fire, lakes of boiling water, and shadowy judges who interrogated the dead about every action taken in life. The soul had to declare its innocence through what scholars now call the negative confession, proclaiming before each judge, "I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not harmed others. I have not caused pain. I have not acted unjustly." Each declaration was both a defense and a reflection of the moral code they believed governed the universe. This moment reveals how deeply the Egyptians connected ethics with eternity. Their religion was not merely about rituals or offerings. It was about character. A wealthy man who lived unjustly could still lose his soul, while a humble laborer could gain eternal peace. In this way, the afterlife became the ultimate equalizer, a realm where truth mattered more than power. And yet, even in the face of such profound beliefs, the Egyptians remained human, fearful, hopeful, and endlessly curious. They filled their temples with prayers, asking the gods for protection, guidance, and mercy. They left offerings of food and drink at tomb entrances, believing the decay of the deceased would return to consume these gifts. In doing so, the living and the dead remained connected, bound by love that transcended mortality. This relationship between the worlds of the living and the dead created a unique sense of continuity. Ancestors were not gone. They were present in another form, capable of blessing or guiding their descendants. Letters were even written to the dead, asking for help in times of trouble, as if the boundary between life and eternity was thin and permeable. Through these practices, ancient Egypt crafted one of the most enduring visions of the afterlife in human history. A vision not of fear, but of profound continuity. Death was a doorway, not a wall. It separated realms, but did not sever bonds. The soul journeyed onward. A memory, love, and identity endured forever. And so, as centuries passed and dynasties rose and fell, this belief remained astonishingly resilient. Empires collapsed, foreign rulers arrived, temples were rebuilt, and yet the core idea endured, that the soul could achieve everlasting life. It is this unwavering conviction that still echoes across the desert today. Every pyramid, every painted sarcophagus, every silent mummy, resting in a museum case is more than an artifact. It is a declaration across millennia, a message from a civilization that refused to accept death as the final chapter. They looked into the darkness of the grave and answered not with despair, but with faith. Faith that the soul could travel beyond the horizon of the known world. Faith that truth would triumph over chaos. Faith that memory would outlive time itself. And in that faith, they built monuments not just of stone, but of belief. Monuments that still whisper across the sands of Egypt that eternity is not a dream, but a destiny waiting for the worthy.